Hola Bucaramanga, estamos felices de llegar a la ciudad bonita. Soy Elena Plop, Delivery Unit Manager de Endava Bogotá y Endava Bucaramanga. Somos Endava, multinacional TI con más de 20 años de experiencia en el diseño de soluciones de transformación digital. A nivel global tenemos un equipo de más de 10.000 personas.
¿Por qué escogimos Bucaramanga? Queremos seguir creciendo en Colombia y nuestra experiencia con el talento de la región de Santander ha sido excelente. Son la cuarta economía del país, vemos un gran potencial de crecimiento en esta región y queremos llevar todo nuestro conocimiento en el sector de IT para crear oportunidades en conjunto y crecer dentro de esta región.
Soy Diego Díaz, soy iOS Developer y llevo 4 años en la compañía. Como santanderano me siento muy orgulloso que la compañía que me ha dado la oportunidad de crecer profesionalmente ahora ponga sus ojos en mi tierra. Y estoy muy seguro que vamos a conseguir grandes talentos de la región.
Estén atentos a nuestras redes sociales para futuros eventos en la ciudad y los invitamos a que visiten nuestra página web para conocer muchísimo más sobre nuestra cultura y nuestras vacantes disponibles.
We're more than a delivery center leading technical excellence. We've been in this beautiful city for more than 5 years now, and we got to be this amazing team of more than 500 people together making history. So let us show you what is Endava Bogotá.
Estamos orgullosos de nuestra cultura. Nuestro propósito es siempre ser nuestra mejor versión. Vivimos los valores de Endava en todo lo que hacemos.
Nos encanta lo que hacemos, nos apasiona aprender y aplicar nuevas tecnologías, afrontar retos nuevos y proponer soluciones innovadoras.
Estar acá es una nota, es un lugar donde aprendo, tengo amigos y la paso muy bien en el proceso. Es un gran lugar para estar.
Acá empecé mi carrera profesional y desde entonces he trabajado de la mano de los mejores para crecer y estar donde estoy hoy.
Y es por esto que en Endava apoyamos el desarrollo de perfiles junior y senior en nuestras diferentes disciplinas.
Nuestros proyectos son interesantes y retadores. Conformamos equipos interdisciplinarios para que den lo mejor a nuestros clientes en Europa, Estados Unidos y Australia. Tratamos de que nuestros equipos sean muy felices y den lo mejor de sí.
Hola Bucaramanga, estamos felices de llegar a la ciudad bonita. Soy Elena Plop, Delivery Unit Manager de Endava Bogotá y Endava Bucaramanga. Somos Endava, multinacional TI con más de 20 años de experiencia en el diseño de soluciones de transformación digital. A nivel global tenemos un equipo de más de 10.000 personas.
¿Por qué escogimos Bucaramanga? Queremos seguir creciendo en Colombia y nuestra experiencia con el talento de la región de Santander ha sido excelente. Son la cuarta economía del país, vemos un gran potencial de crecimiento en esta región y queremos llevar todo nuestro conocimiento en el sector de IT para crear oportunidades en conjunto y crecer dentro de esta región.
Soy Diego Díaz, soy iOS Developer y llevo 4 años en la compañía. Como santanderano me siento muy orgulloso que la compañía que me ha dado la oportunidad de crecer profesionalmente ahora ponga sus ojos en mi tierra. Y estoy muy seguro que vamos a conseguir grandes talentos de la región.
Estén atentos a nuestras redes sociales para futuros eventos en la ciudad y los invitamos a que visiten nuestra página web para conocer muchísimo más sobre nuestra cultura y nuestras vacantes disponibles.
We're more than a delivery center leading technical excellence. We've been in this beautiful city for more than 5 years now, and we got to be this amazing team of more than 500 people together making history. So let us show you what is Endava Bogotá.
Estamos orgullosos de nuestra cultura. Nuestro propósito es siempre ser nuestra mejor versión. Vivimos los valores de Endava.
Okay, so hi everyone. Can you hear me? Perfect. Well, welcome to another edition of the Connect IT. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Laura Ardila, part of Comms team, first I want to thank everyone for making this possible, our speakers, international speakers, local speakers, ex-Endavan speakers that are welcome home. Well, first, before I introduce Elena, our DU manager, we're going to remind the logistics of the event. We're having a streaming, so sometime maybe we can give like a announcement before the streaming cuts a little bit or something. We will let you know. The event will be in English since we have international speakers, as you can see. And after we finish this event, we will have a raffle with the number that you have on your sticker. So please don't lose the sticker. And then we will pass to the barbecue and tacos and DJ and everything. So thank you for being here. And I will introduce Elena Plop, our Delivery Unit Manager from Bogotá and Bucaramanga.
Thank you. Buenas noches, Bogotá. Buenas noches, Colombia. Bienvenidos.
Welcome, bine ați venit, and I know in a few other languages as well, but we don't have that broad of an audience. Thank you all very much for being with us tonight. Connect IT for Endava Bogotá has an actual tradition. We've been doing this for the past 6 years. And Endava is sponsoring Connect IT for, I think, what's about 8 years by now. It's a lot of time. And there's always this great sentiment of being able to interact, be close, keep close to the community. And this is part of how Endava, strives to give back to the community, learn with and from the community, and keep on growing. So thank you for deciding to spend a few hours with us tonight. There's a serious part and then there's the fun part, but I hope you're going to enjoy all that. And I'm not going to take a lot longer time. I'm sure all of you already had the time to know details about Endava. Thank you for that. I'm going to introduce the actual host and moderator of tonight's edition, our very own head of development, Alejandro Guarin. And in his turn, he's going to introduce our speaker in due course. Thank you all, and enjoy.
So first of all, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I know that moving in Bogota City can become a hassle, but it's a pleasure to see many familiar faces and many new ones. So thank you everyone for joining us today. As you know, as part of our philosophy in Endava is to share knowledge. And that's the reason why we're here tonight. The idea is that we are here to learn, to see a little bit on the future of what is expected from developers in the area of Java. So for tonight, we have a special guest. And for me, it's actually an honor to be the person to present him tonight. So let me introduce Laurentius Pilka. He's a dedicated... There you go. So he's a dedicated development lead here and trainer here in Endava. He leads projects that has worldwide impact. He's a technical writer, actually. That's something to be really proud of. He's actually the author of 2 books and a 3rd book that it's on the process. So we have his book, Spring Start Here, Spring Security in Action, and his latest addition to his book, How to Read Java. So as a Java instructor, he has delivered thousands of trainings. So for us, it's an honor to finally have him here in Bogota. He has done trainings in Bucharest, New York, San Francisco, Warsaw, Belgrade, Berlin, and finally we have him here in Bogota today. So everyone, please, Laurentius Pilka.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Buenas tardes. Muchísimas gracias por venir aquí a nuestro evento. Voy a hablar en inglés porque no hablo bien español. Pero puede ser por la próxima vez, cuando vuelvo aquí en Bogotá, me puedes ayudar a mejorar mi español y hablar más bacano. Gracias. Okay, I'm also waving to our audience online. We have a lot of people online. Hi guys. We are going to discuss today about the new authorization server in Spring Security. Who is using Spring here? And Spring Boot, some people, very good. It's a very important timing now for Spring and Spring Boot, because next month in November, we will have Spring Boot 3 out, and the first version of the piece of software I will present today. So that's why it's very important. It's somewhere between Halloween and Christmas. I don't know how it gets, but it's very important, and we will use it today, live coding. But before we do that, what about a selfie together? What do you think? Yeah, that's it. So what I want you to do is raise your hands and scream Bogotá, okay? So I want to see you all say 1, 2, 3, hands up, Bogotá. Moro. Gracias. Okay, now the serious part. So don't see my presentation, but hopefully someone will be able to help me with that. Okay, now it is. The new Spring Security Authorization Server is a piece of software that will be introduced in November this year, so in a month from now on. That's why in my live coding today, I will use a milestone version, so a version that was not released yet. It's basically one of the test versions before the general availability, and that's what I will do with Spring Boot as well. If you are Spring users here, it's very important for you to understand what Spring Boot 3 comes with, because it's probably that you will upgrade your software very soon. But why do I name my presentation Spring Security? It was actually a new hope there, and you see the Millennium Falcon, is because this is a piece of software that has been deprecated about a couple of years ago, and it wasn't introduced until the community really asked a lot for it. A year ago, we started the implementation of this piece of software, and only now it will completely be available, and we will be able to implement our own authorization server with Spring. Alejandro already told a lot of things about me. I will skip over this part. Most people know me because of my book, Spring Security in Action, Spring Start Here, and my YouTube channel. I won't have time for the questions today because we only have about 20 minutes for my demo. So what I advise you is approach me after the event when we have the beer, and of course approach me online on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And I'm glad to answer to all the audience. And of course, this is my latest book. It's not released yet. In a couple of months from now on, it will be printed. And it's a book on troubleshooting Java applications. 3 of you guys will take the book. Now, let's start with, before trying to actually write code, see what we are going to do. Who knows what OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect is? You should know that no matter what kind of language you use, Python, C#, Golang, Java, okay, we are going to try to build an application in only 15 or 20 minutes we have that will allow us create an entire authorization code grant type flow. And that's not Darth Vader there, that's Katushka, my character from my book, okay? That means we will redirect the user in the browser. You don't have to read this, I know it's small. We will redirect the user in the browser, and then we will call an endpoint to get an access token, which will be a JWT access token. This is the most used kind of access token today. It's used to grant authorization to specific backend applications. And that's basically the end of our demo. But are we able in only 15 minutes to create such an application with the new Spring Security Authorization Server? Well, we will try at least. It's only a few pieces of code that I have to plug into the framework and customize. One of them is called the provider settings, which is been helping me to configure the authorization server with the general configurations. I will have to define the user management, which is done through the user detail service, which is basically a common bean from Spring Security for many years. I will have to define the way the application manages the clients, and then I will have to create at least one pair of public-private RSA keys that will be used to sign the token. And that's it with the presentation. Let's basically try it. Okay, I have my IntelliJ started here, and I will start from scratch. I would like to create a new application, a new project, and we call it Connect IT Bogotá. I will use the latest long-term supported Java version, which is Java 17. In the panel we have today, just after my talk, we will discuss about what happens after Java 17 and even up to 21, 22. And then I promised you that I will use a milestone version of Spring Boot 3 that will be released in November. The only thing I need to add now is the Spring Web dependency, because what I build is a web application. And then I just press the create. And you can already see what happens here. Good. Next, I will add a dependency that can't be provided by Spring Boot yet, and that's because it's first released. I hope you can see the text. It's big enough, okay? Oh, fine. And what I will do is take this dependency straight from the documentation And you can see that it's still a milestone version. How can you see that? This M2 at the end. The reason I couldn't select it from Spring Boot is because this is literally 1.0.0. So Spring Boot can't know yet about it, because only when it will be released as a general available will be able to be introduced in Start Spring IO. And to make sure that the version has been downloaded correctly, I will refresh my Maven project, and that should be it. And now I only have to, going back to my presentation, step by step, take the components and plug them in. The simplest, of course, we will just create a simple version to prove to make our demonstration. Normally, an application would be more complex, but you would have more than 15 minutes to write it. So what I need is a configuration package, and then I will just create a simple class. I usually call it security config. Okay. And being a configuration class, in Spring Boot, we use an annotation that is called that configuration. Now, for those of you who are using an older version of Spring Security, you might expect me extend the Web Security Configurer Adapter class. But it's deprecated. About a couple of months ago, it got deprecated. With the latest Spring Security version, we don't use that anymore. So in case you use it in your projects, you will have to, as soon as possible, change it to the new approach. And the new approach is, instead of extending Web Security Configurer Adapter, creating a Security Web Filter bin. So that's what we are going to do. Filter chain. And this should be a bin in the context, so I have to use the bin annotation. And it takes the HTTP security configurer as a parameter. This is basically same as if you would have extended Web Security Configurer Adapter, same as overriding the configure method. And then I just have to configure that. But in case of the authorization server, I will need actually two kind of bins. One of them that's related to the default authorization server configuration, so that's why I called it AS security filter chain, and one for the application. So what I will do actually is have a couple of bins. And I will name them differently, of course, because you can't have bins with the same name in the Spring context. And then, because it's two of them, you also have to give them an order, otherwise Spring Boot will not know which one has priority over the other. So I will just make this one more prio than the other, using the order annotation. Okay, and now let's use it. So how do we use it? First of all, we use an utilitary method to apply some default configuration. For this one, I will need to also throw some exception. And then I can create the bin using the builder build method. But since I'm using the authorization code flow, I know that if you are not, I will redirect the user to the login, and if you are not authenticated, then you need to log in. So what I will do, I will say something like this. If you got an exception like a 401 unauthorized, then send the user to the login page, which by default, with the web dependency in Spring Boot, is /login. And that's basically my authorization server configuration. For the second one, I just have to define the authentication method. I simply usually use a form login, which is the minimum I can do. Of course, I would be able to customize it if I want, but we still have only 10 minutes probably. And then make sure that all the requests are authenticated. And then still build the application and return it, and throw the exception. Okay, but this is only the main configuration for authorization and authentication. Now next, we should really try to take all this one by one. The provider settings was renamed in version 1 as authorization server settings. So I'm just going to create a bin of type authorization server settings. This is the simplest bin. Since I don't want to change any endpoint, I will just create a default instance like this. and that's it. I would be able to customize this to change all the endpoints the authorization server exposes, but today we don't have the time. Then I need to define the user management. So I need at least one user. Normally the user would be in a database, but now we will make it in memory. In Spring Security, we use the user detail service contract for that. Make it a bin in the context, and return the minimum in-memory user details manager that will contain only one user. Let's call our user Bill. We usually need to give it a very secure password. At least one authority. And make sure it's part of the user details service. Then we need a password encoder, which is in Spring Security the component managing the passwords. Normally, I would have used a bcrypt password encoder, but that would mean I need to also hash the password. So to shorten the time, I will use this no password encoder. You see it's straight with a line, because you should never use this in a production application. This is a password encoder that doesn't do anything. That's no operation applied on the password. So I keep it plain text, but that's really not something that you want to do in a real world application. But it works for our example. Now, if I'm going back to my presentation, the next thing I need to create is the registered client repository, which is the component managing the application details. That's the clients. If you would build a front-end application with Angular, React, Vue, or maybe a mobile application, iOS or Android, that would be the client. It needs its own configuration. That's what the registered client repository does. So let's create a registered client repository. It also should be a bin in the context. And we will return in the end, same as we did with the user. We will use an in-memory. Usually it should be in a database. And then we say client1, registered client. We can use any ID, literally this is the internal ID. So let me just use a random unique identifier. The client ID is important. This is actually the public client ID. Then we have a secret. This is the password in the client credentials. What else do we need here? We need to specify how do we want the authentication to be. I think usually we use HTTP basic for the client to authenticate. We need to specify which grant types we want to approach. I suggested today we use the authorization code grant type. That's what we said at the beginning of the presentation. We need to have at least one scope, and the new authorization server can recognize the OpenID scope. So I will use the first and the most known OpenID scope, which is OpenID. And because the user needs to be redirected back to the client in the authorization code grant type, we need to also configure the registered, the redirect URI in the configuration. So let's say we have something like this. And then we build it, and then we make sure the client is here. And that's it. That's the minimum you need for a client. With this, we will be able, hopefully, to run an entire flow. And we have the last bin, and I still have a few minutes to finish my presentation. This is the bin used by my authorization server to sign the token. It's so-called a key source. The key source leverages a set of keys, so you can have multiple keys. In a real-world application, you would have multiple keys, and the server would rotate the keys, always using a different key to sign the token. Of course, today, we will minimize the example, adding only one key, which is the minimum we need. So, public JWK source of security context. Make it a bin. And then there are multiple approaches in which we can create a key source pair. I will choose the minimal one that's using directly the Java security package, which is in the JDK. I normally don't really like the Java security package. It has some messy code there. But another alternative would be to add different dependency, and I want to avoid that at least today. So let's use the JDK. And with the JDK, it should be, so what we need, a key pair generator. Let's call it KG from key generator. So we have the key pair generator, and then we will tell it that we want to implement an RSA key pair. Let's actually throw exception for all the others. And then I will need to generate a key pair of a minimum 2048 bytes. That's from specification. And then I would need to actually generate the key pair. So let's generate it. I call it KP from key pair. I will take the public and the private keys. So get private and get public. And I will specifically take them as RSA private and public keys. And that's where the things go a little bit nasty, because unfortunately the interfaces are not correctly settled in Java security, which doesn't allow me any chance then casting the key to my proper type. But I know that this will not throw a class cast exception since I requested the RSA from the very beginning. And then the same I will do with the public key. So I say the public key, RSA public key, from the key pair. And then I will create a wrapper that is called RSA key. I have to be very careful, is the one from Nimbus. This is the wrapper. And this will be placed in the key set. So it's the type placed in the key set. So I just have to create, I think it's easier if I use the builder. Let's use the builder. Private key, we need to specify the private key as well. We need to give it an ID. Let's just give a random unique identifier. And of course we call the build method because it's a builder. Then we create the set. And then after creating the key set with only one key, in our case could be many, we just return a key source. This immutable JW key set is actually an adapter. It's an adapter from the key set to JW key source, so that's why it's working. So we finished. That's basically the minimum configuration for an authorization server. Can try to start it. Let's see if it's working. It should start pretty fast, like somewhere around 3 seconds. 3 seconds. And then we can try it. How do we try it? Well, I just prepared from the very beginning the couple of links, because I don't want to write them now, okay? And this is from the specification. The authorized URL is the one that the client uses to redirect the user when they have to log in. So what I expect, if I open a browser here and I copy this link and I say enter, it redirects me to a form login predefined by Spring Boot. Then I have to log in with my user Bill and 12345, I think it was the password. And then when I press sign in, no worries, endava.com/auth doesn't exist. So that's why I have a 404, but that's fine. I expected that. However, if maybe I can try to show you here. You can see it. That's the code. That's what we need. So we are doing fine. So I will just copy this code, which is called the authorization code, because that's why the entire grant type is called the authorization code. And I'm going to Postman. And what I'm going to do is simulate this call. Again, I prepared it up in advance because it would have taken me some time otherwise, and you would get bored. I'm using the authorization client with secret. I copied the right access token, and hopefully, in the end, if everything works fine, I get an access token. So that's a proof. That's a proof that in only 15 minutes, using this new framework, you can build a working authorization server that gives you a right access token. Now, I can even prove what's inside. I can copy it. But I still have time. 1 minute. Oh my God. But anyway, we are at the end of the presentation, and okay, you don't want to help me, no worries. Maybe just put it in jwt.io, which I'm pretty sure you might know, and decode the token to see this is a real valid token that has been created for bill, issued by our client, and that expires at a specific point. In the header, we have the key ID, and this key ID is basically what the resource server would use to validate the token. You can find the key ID by calling the key ID link. And this is actually the key, and the ID should be the same one, 09D0. If you go back, you should see that this is exactly the same key. So again, the proof that the token was indeed signed correctly with the key that we added into our key set. Cool, but the time is up, and I'm pretty sure you have questions, but I will have to take them at the very end. I hope you liked our mini demo here, and you are now at least aware about the fact that Spring Boot 3 will be released in November, and this piece of software as well. Thank you very much, and we are all looking forward, of course, for the panel, so stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, everyone, I hope that was a little bit inspiring when we think about authorization too, and how we can actually approach the security using this new framework in the new version of Spring Boot. It brings slides and lots of ideas of how we can approach security in our next designs using Spring Boot. So, guys, the next section of tonight is going to be a discussion panel with some preparatory questions that we have about the future of Java. So we will have right now a break of 5 minutes while we prepare the stage, and we will be back. So in the meantime, enjoy some beers, enjoy some empanadas, and we will be back in 5 minutes. panel, some discussions with some of the experts that we have brought to have a really nice discussion about the future of Java. So first, I will explain a little bit how the dynamic is going to be. We have some questions that have been prepared for the Java community for our speakers tonight. So we're going to go through some of them, some of those questions. At the end of the of the questions that we have prepared, we will open up for questions from the public. So every one of you, if you have any questions, you will have your opportunity to make them at the end. And for those who are joining us live, we're going to share a Slido link, so you can enter them and start asking your questions. So at the end of the night, we will select the 3 most voted questions, so we are going to ask them to the panelists, the questions that are going to be selected. So before we start our panel, I would like to introduce to all of you the 2 of other guests for tonight. So the first one is going to be Victor, who is right next to me.
Hola, hola.
So who's Victor? He's currently the Director of Engineering at Lulobank, where he's responsible for the architecture, design, development, and delivery of solutions. He's a solutions architect specialized in business intelligence, statistical learning, and data mining. During his career, he developed an extensive experience in programming languages based on JVM, the reason why he's here with us tonight. And with over 14 years of experience, Victor has become a reference in our local community for his technical excellence. So please, everyone, let's welcome Victor. I see that you have your fans in there.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Cornell. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me here. I hope this could be a nice session and we can learn something to take that to home tonight.
Perfect. So our third speaker of the night is Adrián Buturuga. Let's welcome him, please. Adrián is an experienced developer and architect, a certified Scrum Master, trainer, and a university teacher at Bucharest University. Over the year, he has found passion in understanding the intricacies of new domains and in teaching others how to start a career and survive the industry. Over the last 16 years, he has done web and game development, research and development, medical and file transfer applications, as well as processing advertising data and payments. His training and mentoring experience revolves around teaching language basics, formal processes or design and modeling, development and operational processes for delivering software to production. So please welcome Adrián. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure seeing Bogotá, seeing everyone here tonight. And I'm hoping we're going to have a very productive discussion today, discussing about Java, everything related to it, and what are the future plans for it.
Perfect. So let's start with some questions so we can start breaking the ice. So guys, the first question that I have for you is a little bit, we can say that creates a little bit of hassle in the industry, because with all the different offers that we have in terms of languages running on JVM, do you still consider Java is still relevant for the industry?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I thought we agreed we skip the difficult questions.
So, there are lots of languages that have spun off Java, but it will still be relevant, and it still is and will still be relevant because Java is the base language of all of them. Each spin-off language, I know some will be offended because I call them spin-off languages, but each of them has tried to fix one of Java's main problem for a particular domain. That means that you will have Scala, you will have Clojure, you will have various other languages that will help you achieve a particular problem, to solve a particular problem. But if the domain asks for more or is not particularly prepared to be solved only in that particular spin-off language, you will still have to revert to the base language. Also, when you have someone who joins this community and wants to learn how to program, it's better that they learn Java initially to understand how everything works, how everything was built initially, and then based on whatever they're trying to achieve, they could go into the appropriate language that will fix that appropriately. Java has plenty of quirks, plenty of issues. We know that. That's why there are so many languages built on top of it. And probably one of the reasons that you've asked this question is because there are a lot of languages that are trying to leverage the LLVM framework that's going to come up. So they're trying to go away from the JVM, but that's a project that will take quite a lot of time. So Java will still be relevant going further. There are lots of software that are being built with Java. They're being maintained. And it's still the basis of all of the other languages. So you cannot get rid of it that fast.
It's such an emergent language now. So it used to be released every 4 or 5 years. And we can see that the trend is now that they change the release to every 6 months. So that only proves that it's developing faster and the community asks for new things. So continually, it continues to be relevant for the community. The community it's not only huge, but it continuously asks for more and faster.
Yeah, well, I have to say that yes, to me it's still relevant. And adding to that, I think the community and the ecosystem of Java is huge, is mature, right? And these two attributes are very important when you are choosing a programming language to start a new implementation. And also, I agree with Adrian, the older languages will also benefit from this evolution of Java. So it's not, they are part of the ecosystem of Java. So to me, it's really important to understand the evolution that is coming for Java, this new release strategy. We are having new features every 6 months, new releases. So I think, yeah, it's important.
There you go, guys. Learn Java.
Yeah, we need to understand that Java is not necessarily one language. A lot of the languages out there, so it's called Scala, Kotlin, and so on, they are JVM languages. Java is a platform. So Scala is Java, Kotlin is Java. All the languages on the JVM, they are Java. Java is not a language, it's a platform. So yes, it will survive many years from now on.
Perfect, thank you. So, the next question that we have, it's related with how the industry has shifted over the past years. So we have seen that over the last decade, functional programming is regaining its popularity, and so many people have its comments around Java because how we can operate functional programming over an object-oriented language that was made by design. So the question that we have right now is there any ongoing initiative to add new functionally programming constructs to the Java language? And should we be aiming for that?
Fine, I'll start. Given the popularity of the languages that actually are built upon the functional paradigm, you can assume that the community really likes this. So the community really tries to adopt this as much as possible. And as those languages grow and their adoption grows, so will Java try to adopt more and more functionality and bring it back to its core. So it will still remain an imperative language. So the support for that will probably stay there for a while. But as the community requests it, they will be released sooner and sooner. Like Laurencio already mentioned, the release cycle has changed. So now we're going to see releases more often. The community gets even more and more involved, and they can actually request new features, which will hit the market faster.
Okay, well, to me, Java is not the best language to approach with the functional programming paradigm, right? I love functional programming. I'm not an expert, but I like it. If you want that, I think you should look on another language. But it's true that since Java 8, they incorporate many functional programming features in the language, right? So that's what I have to say for that question.
So I will go back to what I said earlier. Java is not only a language, Java is a platform. And indeed, Java is not for functional programming, and I don't think it will ever be. even though starting with Java 8, some functional capabilities have been introduced in Java, I don't think the aim of the team implementing the Java language is to make it functional. But as I said, Java is a platform, so Scala is also, you can consider it Java, is a language that you compile to bytecode and run on the JVM in the end. You want functional capabilities, you go for a language that is functional, designed to be functional, and it's still Java because you run it on the JVM.
Okay, great. So basically, Java as a platform is integrating these new capabilities of functional programming. But if you're really thinking about using functional programming, perhaps we should be thinking about using something else as a consequence.
If I may, I would like to make a remark here. Java is very popular, so there are lots of developers who know Java, and because of that, they're trying to transform Java into something that can fix any kind of problem there is in the wild. And that's not its point. We should not make it functional. We should not make it do data solution very well. We should not make it do machine learning very well. We cannot make it do every of those things very well. It's not jack of all trades. But there could be languages that are built on top of Java that could address an individual problem very well, or, like they said, go to a specific language that was especially designed just for that. Do not try to use Java to fix everything.
Perfect. You guys mentioned that the community is one of the drivers that is actually taking the language and the platform to the next level. What are other elements that you might consider that might actually be the key drivers in the evolution of the language?
The community is the most important for the team who's implementing the Java language and the Java platform. I think the community is the most important. Whatever is requested by the community stays on top of the priority of the things to be implemented. And they have two rules, two golden rules at least, that I know. One of them is the backwards compatibility. And the second one is as much as possible avoid introducing flags when you start something. Still part of the backwards compatibility. So the drives is we want to make the platform satisfy all the requirements of the community, but still stay backwards compatible if possible 100%. It wasn't always possible, but you know that it was very close to 100%. And eventually without introducing new flags for compilation and runtime. So that's...
Yes. Well, I think when I see the projects around Java right now, the main focus that I can see of them is the developer productivity, right? They try to improve that, to make the developers' life easier. So they incorporate new features for the language. That's talking about the language, because the Java is a platform, as you said. Yeah, we have the JVM as well. But for the language, they want to incorporate features that make the language more expressive, right? That's something that the pain points of Java, I think, is that piece, the expressivity of the language. So most of the work that I can see in those projects are focusing on that. Is what I say. I don't know, guys.
I would say that yes, lately we've been looking more and more into how to write better code or faster code with fewer lines of code. So trying to make it as fast as possible to develop as well as to run. And I'd say thanks to the evolution of the IDEs in the latest time, we actually have more and more statistics about that. Lately, you might have heard about code generation tools, AI helping you actually introduce repetitive code into your daily routine so that you can actually build code a lot faster. Due to those tools and the fact that they gather some information about what you do most often, they can actually gather statistics and they can decide what is the best direction to go for Java, because they can see what we're doing more and more often. So what are the recipes that we're integrating every day in our projects? And that could be the basis of selecting the new features that they need to be integrated in the language. And like both of them said, the community and the projects will actually decide based on those statistics which would be better, or what should be the order to integrate them so that they can maintain the backwards compatibility in the principles that Java has had so far.
Great, so we're basically talking here expressivity of the language, the developer experience, and the community of Java as the core driver for the new evolution of the language. Great, it's good to be part of the Java community. So, you guys mentioned about projects. So, we know that many of the languages usually evolve around different projects. In this scenario, I would like you to tell us a little bit about what are the main projects that are driving the direction of the language currently.
Well, I will say to me is Amber project. This project aims to incorporate new features, easy features to the language to improve them yeah, what I said before, to make the developers' life easier, to be easier to implement the problems that we can solve with the language. And right now, I think the other one would be Loom, which is basically a project to allow us as developers to write applications that are capable to run many tasks concurrently, easier, right? Because we have already that in Java, but the easier part of the problem is the key thing here. I don't know.
We have 4 main projects. It's Ember, it's Valhalla, it's Loom, and it's Panama. I think all of them are important. Ember is indeed one of the most visible, and we already have in the latest versions a lot of things that have been implemented there. We have records, we have the enhanced switch, we have instance of operator. We have a lot of things already delivered by Ember, and they aim to improve the Java language, making it less verbose, because usually the community complains about, and we know Java as being verbose. Now, I think this helps a lot. I think there will be some trouble in using those features till the developers understand how to properly use them, because you see, we implement new things in Java, but at the same time we make it more complex, so less easy to learn for beginners and even for us, people with experience. One thing that I would like to say is that in development, we spend more time in reading the code rather than writing the code. So I want you to see Project Amber as a project helping you to read faster code rather than to write faster code. Because if the Ember project would have aimed to writing code faster, then it would help you not a lot. The biggest time we spend when implementing features is reading code, not writing the code. Then of course we have all the performance improvements delivered with Valhalla, the native access to the functions, making easier access to native functions with Panama, and the Loom, which introduces the fibers that we hope to even help us write faster, write faster applications without needing to go to a reactive approach.
I wouldn't necessarily choose a particular project and say that it's guiding Java towards one direction or another, because the 4 that have been mentioned are, let's say, the most commercial. The ones that we keep hearing about, we see a lot of articles about, but Java evolves based on its usages. So you'll see other projects that will introduce features. The guys from Oracle will see, hey, this was introduced, it's being used by a lot of people, it's a good idea, let's introduce it in the core. You've probably heard about the latest changes in Java EE, which have been introduced a few versions back. Jakarta, thanks to the rename. That project was abandoned quite a lot of years ago. Nobody was using it because everyone shifted to Spring. But at some point, the guy said, hey, Spring is used so wildly, why not introduce it back? And they revived the entire idea. There are lots of projects that spin off out of that and try to create, let's say, web servers a lot faster in just a few lines of code. That way you can read them a lot faster, you can implement them a lot faster. And you don't hear them too much about them. So yeah, these four are the most commercial, the most widely used, or referenced actually, but I wouldn't necessarily pick one or the other because there are a lot of minor projects that can shift Java in a very useful direction.
So I think what you say is not thinking only about the projects on the language, but the projects on the platform. Because, for example, one of the most important we have today is GraalVM, which allows us to have native compilation. And all of you guys who are using Java, and when I say Java, it's not only Java as a language, but the JVM applications, you will most likely in the future, especially if you deliver applications in cloud, you would like to natively compile your applications. We have so many projects thinking about that, like OpenXJ and stuff like that. And we only see the 4 projects on the language, but we have some others that are very important, and they are behind the scenes, but we still think they are not important.
So there you go, guys. Again, community leading, which is the main projects that, as Java evolves, depends on the use that the community has. So interested to have a discussion. You mentioned one of the projects that is actually one of the ones that has been running like the longest, and that is actually Loom. For many of those who are here, probably some people won't know what Loom is and what actually lightweight threads and virtual threads means for them. So if you can explain a little bit about the concept, what to expect from Project Loom, to give us a little bit of light of what we should expect with this new introduction, given that is expected to come in with the JDK 19.
Looking at me,
Don't
guys.
be shy, guys.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, Project Loom introduced the most important feature it introduces is fibers, which we call virtual threads. What we need to understand is that virtual threads, they are not faster threads. What virtual threads do is solve kind of pitfall we have now with normal threads, let's call them like this, platform threads, which are wrappers over the operating system thread. So now whenever you have a blocking operation on a thread, it literally blocks a thread of the operating system, which is not okay. And with that, you can't even create a lot of threads, because every time you create a new thread, you borrow one thread from the operating system, and if that's blocked by an I/O operation, you stop it. Fibers are releasing, it's basically releasing the operating system's thread whenever it's blocked. And this way you can have a lot of threads, but whenever you have a blocking operation, it doesn't keep the operating system thread behind the scenes. So that's how it makes the application more performant in general. So that's how the fibers work.
We need to also underline the fact that an operating system has a limited number of threads. So there is this, let's say, conception that if I want a more performant application, I need to have as many threads as possible to handle as much load as possible. So if I have 1 million users using my platform, I would expect that I can create 1 million threads, one per each user to handle all of the load. That's not possible with classic threads, whereas fibers actually emulate the operating system threads so that you can create 1 million threads, reduce the load of unloading the thread from the operating stack and reloading it whenever it yields and gets reloaded. So unless you're actually building applications that rely extensively on a lot of threads that will need to get loaded and unloaded from the processor, you might not get a lot of performance out of using fibers. So like Laurencio mentioned, don't take them as the savior of your solution. They are useful for a particular case when you're relying heavily on threads. And to probably underline that, in the new version of Java, when they will actually introduce Loom, they will not deprecate threads, they will work side by side, because you need to be able, as an experienced developer, to decide which is the best.
Well, I just have to add, maybe I want to make clear the problem Loom is trying to resolve, right? Is I can remember, right? Is the idea with the project is to enable new features, new APIs to make easier to write applications that are capable to run many tasks concurrently, right? These two things are important because right now we have in Java, the way to do this is using threads. The guys already explained that. threads are expensive resources, right? They are expensive because Adrian already told us they are limited in the operating system. And trying to resolve that, we can see another alternatives, libraries like Reactor, RX, and other fancy things like actor model, right? Maybe some of you have read about it. But the thing with these alternatives is that you have to put some abstractions into the code that make harder to read it, right? And we need, or we want the code to be easier to read because we have to maintain it, right? The philosophy around the fibers or the virtual threads is that you can maintain the same programming model that you had with the threads, classic threads, without the impact of using these expensive resources in the way that you shouldn't, because you block them, and it's like when you blocking a thread is bad, right? It's really bad, so you have to avoid that. And with the virtual threads, you have that kind of solution that allows you to keep this easier to implement, but avoiding this problem.
I think it will be very interesting to see what happens in the future with Project Reactor and all the other technologies that try to solve this from an architectural point of view. Because now when we will have a solution from the JDK itself, will we still use those, or we will choose to go with the platform? I don't know the answer. We will probably have to see that.
Yes, and there is something that to me is really powerful about the project, because we are saying that the programming model is going to stay, right? So that means that the applications that we have now written, like with Tomcat, we uses a thread pool, or Yeti, these kind of things. When we have Loon, maybe it could be easier to resolve that problem of blocking threads without doing almost just upgrading the version, and that's it, right? Maybe with the other approach, with the React and Reactor, the things maybe are not that easier.
Great. So guys, there you go. A new way to approach the problem of concurrency in Java. It's a different and exciting project. Let's move on to another of the projects that you mentioned, and it was the Panama project. So I would like you to explain a little bit what is the main promise from the language coming from the project Panama.
So who out here is working with C++? Do you enjoy using alloc and malloc, memory allocation and deallocation? No. Now we have it in Java as well, so that's Project Panama. Adrian, want to tell us something more about it?
So when I first started learning Java, the first pitch I got was, you won't need to care about memory anymore. We have the garbage collector, it will do that for you, it will be perfect. Later, we have 20 implementations of garbage collector that you need to be aware of, how it actually cleans the memory. Now we're making more, even more fun. Now we can actually administer the memory by ourselves and even externalize it, so use it outside of the heap. Panama is going to be exciting.
Leaving the jokes apart, the idea of introducing memory management is not necessarily for you to allocate and deallocate memory. That was not the point. The plan is to allow you to have an easy way, an easy API to call native implementations. Sometimes we need to call things that are implemented, libraries that are in C++, for example, for graphics and stuff like
OpenGL.
that. OpenGL. Now we don't have a really nice way. We have some ways, the JNI, and some ways which are more difficult to use. The idea is to have like 4 or 5 lines of code to simply access any library that's out there in the class path. And for that, they needed to implement also the part with memory. So I think it will be helpful. I'm not sure how many Java applications out there really use native access. I'm pretty sure some of them do use, and it will be a good achievement to refactor the code into like maybe only a few lines of code that do that when Panama will be out.
I would say that I see two main benefits once Panama is out. One would be that we will see faster releases of Minecraft. In case you didn't know, that was actually built on Java. So they actually have a very complex use of the native calls to use OpenGL to create Minecraft, and it's very complicated to use. With Panama, it's going to be faster to do. But jokes aside, if we have this outside in the real world, it would make a lot easier migration of existing systems. Think of all of the systems that have started being developed 20 or 30 years ago in Fortran, in C, in C++ that you need to migrate. Those are giant monoliths. You cannot change them overnight, but you can create some abstraction layers, create the new code in Java, call the native headers, the native functionalities from Java through Panama, and migrate them piece by piece until you actually replace the entire system. So it will help an integration between Java and other systems, and you can do that a lot faster.
Well, I don't have much to add to the explanation. I think Panama has its use cases. I think you summarize them very, very, very well. So I think we're cool to continue.
Very nice. It's interesting to see how we can approach memory access to actually try to start making native calls. It's a different approach and how you can actually structure code and having the ability to do it from the language. In having this new level of abstraction, it's a new way that developers can actually approach legacy code in terms of other languages. But taking that idea a little bit further, given that those functionalities, how do you consider that Graal VM, that is also promising polyglot capabilities, enters to the game, and how it will coexist with Panama, and how do you see the evolve of these two ideas living together?
Well, I will say that they tackle different problems, right? The Panama approach, we already discussed it, but Graal promise is to enable the Java platform to be able to run a program with the right combination of languages. So you can choose the language for the specific problem that you have in the same application. And if you need something else inside the same application, you can choose another language without the performance cost, right? Because all the program will run again over the JVM. So to me, those projects tackle different problems.
So what Graal VM does, what it tackles, is the startup time. The runtime, so the long-running processes, that's different subject, and indeed it tackles different things. So where you will use the native compilation most likely is where you have functions in the cloud, short execution that you need to spin up fast, execute, finish, and then get discarded. While if you want to have something like long running and be fast, then you would probably have to implement access to some native implementation. Am I right?
I would say that Graal, when that particular promise that it makes, it tries to reach out to the community that requests polyglot ecosystems. So I want to have a system where I can build one component in PHP, one in Java, one in whoever knows whatever they want. But we should take into account that this comes at a very heavy cost. Think of Facebook. You probably heard about it. When it started, it had this awesome idea that each team could build part of the system in a different language. So they had it built in 5, 6, 7, 10 languages overall. But over time, that they discovered that it takes a very heavy toll in maintaining and in developing, because you need lots of teams with lots of skills maintaining everything. So over time, they actually migrated everything to, I believe, 1 or 2 languages in the end. So they're trying to shift away from polyglot systems. Graal, like Laur said, it's a system made to spin up a lot faster, to make sure your code executes faster and executes as soon as possible so it can free up resources for short-lived tasks. The polyglot system that it introduced is a nice feature, but we should take care that it's meant for some specific corner cases and we should not abuse it. Panama aims to help it.
Nice.
I agree with that. To me, the Graal VM biggest impact has to do with the possibility to run Java applications native, right? So you don't need the JVM to run it. That's, to me, the biggest impact. But the starting promise was around the polyglot applications.
So for those designing applications using serverless approach, now there you have another possibility into how to approach these new faster cold starts for these new functionalities that you're going to implement natively on the cloud. Now, coming back to Panama and actually the frame memory access, many of the concerns that people are having with this feature is regarding security and a stability point of view. So what do you see are the implication of actually allowing to manage the life cycle of memory resources now that we have this possibility implemented on the language?
I mean, if you will take a look at the specification, the way it was designed, the memory session, which is the main object in accessing and opening manually memory management, is made as a resource that's auto-closable, and that's for a reason. So you should actually put it in a try with resources, and you make sure that it always closes at the end. Again, the reason, from what I know, the reason why they implemented this is to facilitate access to the native native libraries, not necessarily to allow you manage your memory, because that doesn't really make sense in Java. So if you really need to use that, you will probably need to use that when you call native libraries, and when you do that, you will say try, round parentheses, memory session, close, and that's it. And you make sure that it always closes at the end when you finished with calling your native access.
Besides that, I believe that it was also created to be bound to the thread that created it. So even if another thread actually wants to have access to that particular memory, they need to request it explicitly, otherwise they will get denied. And if we're concerned about attackers actually looking at our memory and maybe scanning it or attacking it, think of this particular case. I remember about 5 or 6 years ago, a team at a conference, a very large conference, they decided to showcase an application that would scan the entire RAM and see if they can recognize a specific area of the memory which contained the bombs in Minesweeper. And they would create an identical window as Minesweeper with 20% transparency. They would overlay it with Minesweeper, and they can fix it, they can solve it in 5 seconds, because they would actually scan the entire memory. And you cannot limit the access to a specific area of the memory, but you can do it through the application so that for a short amount of times, we can allocate a specific memory, we can pass it to some native calls, and as soon as that exits, you shut off that memory. So you try to limit as much as possible the window of that particular external memory.
Want to add something? Okay, perfect. So there you go, guys. Now you know that if you know exactly what you're using the technology for, you can be sure that there is a secure layer in thinking about how you are actually accessing the memory. Let's move on to another of the projects that we have. So the project Valhalla. And with Project Valhalla, the language model intends to bring primitive classes. So I would like you to explain to the audience what are those and why should we care about them?
That will be actually two different kinds of new structures the project will introduce. Is the value classes and the primitive classes. One of them having no identity, one of them having no reference and no identity. And let's take the primitives, because you mentioned them. So the idea is that with primitive, being that they are not referenced, they are not like objects, they are direct access. Of course, the performance of working with primitives is better. Now, where does this help is when we have operations with a lot of primitives, because if you do x plus y, you will not see a lot of big deal in adding two integers or adding two int primitives. But if you have collections and you process over collections of primitives, then you could see an improvement in the processing speed. Now, there is a problem with collections. Collections, the way they are designed now, they use generic types, and generic types, they also have a limitation. They exist up to the compilation, so they don't exist at the runtime. Whatever you create a list of integer, or a list of cat, or a list of another object you design, whenever you compiled it, it still becomes behind the scenes actually a list of object array. So that's actually the biggest problem with Project Valhalla, is that it doesn't only have to introduce some objects that act as primitives, so they have direct access. It also has to change the generic types to allow them exist before after compilation. So meaning that if you define a list of int, or a list of any primitive that you might define as an object, but it acts as a primitive, because that's what the primitive types will be. When you say a list of that kind of object, which is a primitive type, and you compile, behind the scenes there will no longer be an object array, but that type of an array. And that way, because you end up with a bytecode that contains an array of that specific type of primitives, will also help in the performance. Considering you have more values in the collection, of course.
You should also explain a bit what you mean by performance, because when you talk about performance, it could be one of two, execution time or memory. So with Valhalla, some of the headers of the classes will no longer be kept in memory. So whenever you have a list of objects, a collection of objects, it will maintain not just the value, but the blueprint of that particular object, the headers describing that type. So with Valhalla, those are actually dropped, so the memory footprint would be a lot lower. Also, since they're actually primitives and they're not, they're directly referenced, consider of the famous problem of the equals contract. Some people forget to use equals and they would just use double equals. Well, with primitives, that's not going to be a problem anymore because they're always going to be pointing to the same area of the memory.
Yes, I just want to make a question for you guys. Is maybe if you can see right now actual problems that we can leverage these new features of Valhalla. Because to me is yes, we have that, we will have that, but I can see a real problem, or most of the problems that we have can benefit from that. I don't know, guys, if maybe you have an example.
The first thing I have in mind is cryptography. That is where you use a lot of operations on vectors and arrays. And about that, also Project Valhalla comes with the Vector API, aiming to help the performance of processing arrays on the compromise of introducing more lines of code, which is affecting the maintainability. But when you have something like cryptography or maybe graphic processing, where you do calculations on large arrays and many arrays, then I think that this helps in improving the performance, at least in such capabilities. Do you have anything in mind?
Everything that needed to be said was said, so.
Perfect.
Cool.
All right, guys. So we are running to the end of my side of the conversation. So I would like to finish my questions with this one. What will be your recommendations for the audience to keep up with the new changes? So what should be us as developers be focusing on? Because we have been discussing about the things that are going to happen in the future. What should be our concerns in the present as today?
Well, to me, is to maintain your build pipelines in a way that you are able to try faster the new versions of Java, right? Because in that way you can continue updating having the benefit from these new releases, and also the JVM. So we already mentioned that the JVM is part of this platform, and part of the changes that we can see have to do with the performance improvements in the JVM. So only doing that, you will have a benefit, having the ability to upgrade your applications faster. That's my recommendation.
One of the things that I would like to remind everyone is that now we have Java release every 6 months, and that's for a reason. We still have only some of the versions that we aim to use in production, and that's what we call the long-term supported versions. But the reason we have a release every 6 months is to help you upfront test the capabilities that are introduced in the language and learn eagerly. So my advice is use the fact that Java language now releases every 6 months a new version. Take whatever is implemented, try to learn it at that time. Java 19 was released about 3 weeks ago, I think. Loom and virtual threads, you already have them, the first preview in there, for example. Next thing you can do is test it, and that's what you can do with each and everything that is released, and that's the way in which you know when the next long-term supported, 21 will be the next next year October, you will already know, you will already have assessed the things that will help your applications, and you can upgrade up front. Your team will already know what to do, will already know how to use the new features, and that's by having the ability to frequently learn and see what's in the language.
In case you haven't noticed, yes, I'm a bit more conservative when it comes to adopting new features. So I would suggest that you stick to the long-term supports within your applications, but like Laura mentioned, keep trying and experimenting the new features in the intermediate version so that you can actually see what's going to be the impact. Because if you switch from 17 to 18 to 19 to 20, blah, blah, you'll have small increments of changes to adapt to that particular version. Whereas if you stick your head in the sand for 2 years and you switch directly from 17 to 21, you're going to have lots of changes and it's going to be very hard to do. So you need to be aware of what's introduced in each version, experiment with it, plan so that you have a design or an architecture where it's a lot easier to maintain your build green and to evolve. But I wouldn't necessarily say introduce in production bleeding edge the first thing that you can, because we introduce bugs, we're developers, so that's always the case. But I would say look at the Java roadmap, see what is promised in the next release, see what it means, experiment with the milestones. Laura already mentioned, okay, see milestone 1 for the applications, for the authorization server. So you know how it's going to be done, you see what is deprecated, what you need to do. And also try to be involved as much as you can in the user groups for Java, for Spring, for whatever, and try to see as much as possible what people are actually using and how they're being built, so that you can plan for your applications to evolve and to adapt those new changes.
Great, those were some great recommendations for us as developers. Now, I'm going to open up from some questions from the public. If from the audience someone has any questions, this is the time to ask the experts.
I have been silenced.
Now? Yeah. Okay. Hi, greetings from Uruguay. We are a bunch of people from Uruguay here. My question, I'm not an expert of Java. When facing to a client or when decide we're going to use Java in a new project, one of the first things that arise is licensing. How it changes after version 8, and are we going to use JDK? Are we going to use version 8? And how it's going to be evolved with some changes of the licensing. Do you think that the change of the licensing schema in Java and how it's going to evolve is changing how people see Java or the adoption of Java, or didn't change? Thank you.
Okay, that's a difficult one actually. Some things changed with Java 9. Actually, many things changed with Java 9. One of the things is the fact that we have now multiple distributions. So any organization can literally create their own Java distribution under a set of rules. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I can't really don't trust me on any legal thing. But a lot of the distributions that are out there, they promise even free support. So of course, it's not that Java costs now to run. It depends on what you want. Some of the organizations ask for a specific paid license if you want specific support. Some of them don't. And since there are many there, whenever you choose to run an application, you first need to, of course, make a bit of a research and see which is the one that applies best for you in terms of licensing. It can be adoption, it can be the Oracle JDK, it can be the Open JDK. There are a lot of them out there, but I don't want you to think that Java is now on money or something like that. Whenever we discuss about the distribution, it's only maybe support that can be on money. You want to add something, guys?
Hey, I would like to share a very short story from, I believe, 12 years ago from my professional life. I was working with Project Darkstar. You probably never heard of it, but it was a project maintained by Sun.
DevStar?
Darkstar.
Oh, okay.
So when it was bought by Oracle, they decided overnight to change the licensing and kill the project. We were using it intensely. The community was so adamant about using it that overnight they created the fork of the project. Red Dwarf came into being, and everyone shifted to the open source solution. The same happened with Java. So when they changed the licensing, OpenJDK became an option for everyone because that has a much more permissive license. And this is an industry where the community will not back down too easily. So even if the licensing ever changes, you don't need to worry. The community will definitely find a way to make it free and available. Whereas for business, if you need support, a specific level of support, like Laura mentioned, there will always be a solution with money. Don't worry.
Okay. Is there? Yeah. Do we have another question here?
Yeah, thank you. I know that there's a lot of non-Java programmers among the public, so I want you to put on the non-Java developers' perspective. I want you to ask if you, I know that there is a special characteristics that makes a language be above the other languages in some certain use cases. I want you to ask if you know which characteristics or features of language would make, for instance, a startup to prefer Java among the others.
So to understand the question is why we will use Java instead of other language for a startup, right?
Yeah, I would say because I know that, for example, we can do a database query in JavaScript or in Python. We can do in some cases the same as Java does. So I want you to know, to convince me to use Java instead of Python in a startup project.
We don't want you to convince to use Java, honestly. So from an architectural point of view, you choose the language and the platform depending on what you implement. So you don't choose Java because Java. You choose it depending on what you need to implement, your team, what they already know. If you have a team of Java developers, you will choose Java, and that of course applies to your software. You will choose Java because of that. If you implement some machine learning stuff, you will probably go for Python because it's much better. It has the libraries for that. So I don't think someone needs to convince you to use a specific language. You always have to choose the platform and the language depending on the factors that influence the specific project.
Yes, that's right. I mean, if you selecting a programming language is not an easy task. right? Because you need to consider many things. One of them is your team. You need to look the skills of your team, the community. We already said that, right? The kind of problems that you are going to resolve, and you have to put all of that and make a smart decision for that. That is, I don't know.
Which is not necessarily Java. The smart decision
yeah,
can be something else.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to take one last question.
Hello. Yes. So my question is somewhat related to the previous question, and it's referencing something that you mentioned in this panel. Would you be able to provide examples of scenarios where you think, let's say, Groovy is more appropriate than Java, or Scala is more appropriate than Java, or Clojure is more appropriate than Java, or Java is more appropriate, and specifically just limiting to languages on the JVM rather than all the languages in the world? Sorry, last question.
I will try to answer that, but to me it's like the same answer that I gave before, right? It depends of the problem. To me, Java has an issue is that many of the things that we are seeing now, other languages already have it, right? You can see, for example, the Loom, the green threads that Loom is providing in Java. We can see an implementation of that, for example, in Kotlin. Yeah, we have coroutines. Go have that. Maybe I think Elixir already has an implementation of green threads. And at the end, you need to look not only on the features of the language, but you need to see the team that you have, the market of the people that you can find, right? And understand what the people also want, because, for example, I can give you an example. In my case, you can find people who is looking to write code in other language than Java. And they know Java, but they want to learn something else. And that could be a good reason to choose another language, to me, all right? So it's hard to answer your question, because there is not just an answer, right?
Every question, every language has its own purpose. For example, you would choose Scala if you want to have a functional approach. If you would have with Spark or something like that, probably Scala would match better than Java. When you write a pipeline in Jenkins, probably use Groovy instead of Java. If you want to have shorter code but still Java-like, you might use Kotlin. But using one or the other, the choice really depends on the specific project you have, because I don't recommend you use Kotlin now just because it's new and hot at the moment. If you have a team of, let's say, 5 developers and they say, yeah, we want to work with Kotlin now, or we want to work with Scala, always imagine that in the future, maybe those developers will leave the company or the project, and then you will have to replace them. And you have to ask yourself, if this project works with Java or Kotlin the same way, and my developers leave, how easy will be for me to replace them? Will I find other developers outside that know Scala? I will find them easier than I find developers with Java? That can be a question as well. And I raise this because I've seen a project where this became a difficulty. That should also be something we take into consideration from an architectural point of view.
I will try an evasive answer as well. So you need to take into consideration also the community. Because if you're trying to build something that wasn't built before, you could be a pioneer. Then again, you could have bugs and problems, and you could find yourself in the situation where Stack Overflow has no answers for your question. So you look at the team and the capabilities, you look at the future, how you want to maintain it, but you should also look at how it's been done so far, because you will definitely have problems along the way, and you will definitely need some help from someone else. Don't try, this is an advice from cryptography, don't try to reinvent the wheel if it's already going very well. So stick to what they're consecrated, so what they have been built for, and use them for that particular purpose, but keep in mind all of the other factors as well.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I know that we have some more questions, but the thing is that we are running out of time. So we're going to leave those questions for the next session where we have our network, so you can approach the speakers and ask them directly, any question that you might have. So before we're coming to an end of our event, I recall that we mentioned at the beginning that each one of you has a number on your sticker. That number has a purpose. So right now what we're going to do is that we're going to be giving up a small gift for all of you. So we're going to make some random numbers, select who are going to be the winners based on the number that you have on your shirt. So if we can like
I think we should. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we should move so people can.
El número que salga, se pega.
Listo.
Así 8 veces. O sea, toda la señal a Pablo, ¿ok?
Okay, so we're gonna go with the first number. So number 38. Hey, we have a winner. So if you want to come up to the stage, so now you go on the opportunity to have one of the versions of Laurentius' book, Spring to Start here.
So I will make sure to sign them if you want at the very end.
If you want, you can have it there. So let's select another winner for the night. Number 31. Let's get with the next one. Number 15. Oh, there you go. So next one. So, someone is in luck today. You should try something today. Number 16. So the next one. That's what, yeah. Number 45.
So guys, if you want a signature on it, you can come to me at the end, okay?
Okay, so for the last two winners, remember that I mentioned that Laurentius is already on the making of his new book. So for the last three winners, you're gonna earn a voucher to later reclaim a new version of his new book, How to Read Java. So Let's go with the next number, please. Number 6. So in order to reclaim the voucher, we're going to get your email and we will send it to you. So just keep that in mind. So the next number, please. Number 52. You have it on the back. There you go. And the last winner of the night, number 21. Oh, there he is. So remember, guys, the last 3, remember to give us your emails. We already have them, but I want to make sure that we have exactly your email so we can make the vouchers get to you through the email.
And just to make sure it's an e-book, okay, for the last one, because the book is not printed yet. Yeah.
All right, guys. So that was the last part of during the night of presentation. I want to thank you all for coming here. It is a pleasure to finally see so many familiar faces and some new faces here joining us together, trying to follow this path of technical excellence. I hope that each one of you have learned something tonight. I did. And I expect that we continued on the growth path of increasing our capabilities, keep learning, keep growing, and I hope to see you next in the future. Have a great night. So now we're gonna go on to move to the next terrace, where we're gonna have some tacos and some beer, so we can have some network, have some fun. Salió súper. La foto.
Well, you done me and you bet I felt it. I tried to be chill, but you're so hot that I melted. I fell right through the cracks. Now I'm trying to get back.